Boots sink into cold mud at the edge of an ice age river. Dawn is just breaking, and a mammoth stands there like a moving wall, steam rolling off its back as it drinks. One human steps forward and looks absurdly small. If this turns into a fair fight, it ends fast. A mammoth can crush you in seconds. So how did ancient humans ever take one down? Not by being stronger, not by one perfect spear throw. They did it by refusing the kind of fight the mammoth was built to win. Look wider, and the real weapon shows itself. There are watchers spaced out along the bank. Blockers stand where the ground firms up. Tool carriers keep distance with extra shafts, stone points, and cord. The river bends into a narrow pinch of slick mud, and that muddy bank is the trap. It steals traction and makes turning slow. In that setup, the mammoth's size becomes a problem. It can't pivot quickly, it can't charge cleanly, it can't use its strength safely. This is what the hunt really means. It's a system made of people, timing, terrain, and tools, all arranged like a living net. And sometimes, the smartest move in the system is choosing not to attack at all. That pattern is still ours. We handle dangerous animals today with barriers, spacing, signals, and plans, not wrestling. Big problems rarely fall to force, they fall to coordination. But when archaeologists find mammoth bones later, how can they tell if humans hunted it or just arrived after it died? A gloved hand tilts a heavy rib bone under a desk lamp. The surface looks smooth until the light catches a thin line, then another, like tiny scratches that were never meant to be seen. This is where the big claims live or die. Not in the size of the animal, but in what the bone can honestly tell you. So here's the question in plain language. What's the difference between saying humans hunted it and saying humans used it? Archaeologists sort the clues by strength, because a giant animal can end up on the ground for a lot of reasons. Predators, floods, winter, old age, people arriving late, people coming back much later. The strongest here is direct hunting evidence, weapon trauma. That means a point fragment embedded in bone, or impact damage that fits a weapon strike, not a crack from weather or pressure. It's rare, and it has to be read with care. Next comes processing evidence. Cut marks from stone tools. Systematic dismembering. Bones broken in ways that show marrow extraction. This tells you people worked the carcass, even if you still have to ask whether they killed it or found it. Then there's association evidence. Bones and tools in the same place. Sometimes that matters. Sometimes water, scavengers, and time push unrelated things together. Separate from all of that is reuse evidence. Mammoth bones in a shelter ring. Tusks moved and stacked. Ribs used like beams. That shows the animal became material, not automatically that it died by hunting. A wide bone field can look like a massacre. Then you isolate one rib with clear weapon-related damage, and suddenly most of the other bones slide into different categories. At places like Kraków Spadzista, the power is in the stack. Weapon signals plus butchery signals plus context, not one exciting object. Once you start thinking this way, extraordinary claims need multiple kinds of support. Okay, so what did their weapons actually look like as a complete system, not just a stone point in a museum case? Hold a stone point between your fingers, and try to imagine it stopping an animal that weighs as much as a small bus. By itself, it's just a sharp triangle. You can snap it with your hands. You can dull it on bone. You can lose it in grass. Now add one more piece. Press it into sticky resin, wrap it tight with sinew, lock it onto a short wooden foreshaft, then fit that foreshaft into a longer main shaft. Suddenly, the stone isn't doing the hard part alone. The wood gives reach. The bindings keep the edge from wobbling. The adhesive spreads stress, so the tip doesn't explode on impact. And the foreshaft makes it modular. If the tip breaks, you can swap the front piece instead of throwing away the whole weapon. So how can wood, stone, and sinew become strong enough to bring down a giant animal? Because the killing power comes from a whole weapon system. The point, the haft, the shaft, the glue, the lashings, and the way the body delivers force. Archaeology often preserves the stone tip, but that can mislead you. The missing parts were usually organic, and those parts controlled reliability. We know early hunters could build serious wooden weapons from finds like the Schoningen spears. Later, adding stone points and better hafting turned sharpness into control. And control matters, because there probably wasn't one universal method. In some places and times, hands drive the spear with a steady, braced thrust. In others, distance and timing matter more, and the weapon is sent forward with a throw or another delivery style. The exact mix can change by region and era, and people still debate details. It's like a knife today. The blade matters, but so do the handle and how you use it. The same is true when risky work gets turned into planned operations, with teamwork and safety rules. Even with a good weapon system, how do you get close enough to use it without becoming the casualty? A line of dark shapes moves toward a wet lowland, and the ground ahead looks harmless until the first heavy foot presses down and doesn't bounce back. The lead animal slows, not because it's tired, but because the earth steals its speed. Up on firmer rises, watchers are already spaced out, reading the herd's direction. Near the edges of better footing, others wait where a big body would rather not go. And one lane is left open on purpose, a way for people to back out fast if the animal breaks the plan. Here's the trick ancient humans could use when hunting giant animals. They didn't have to be stronger than something the size of a small bus. They had to make it move where it moves badly. What tactic makes a giant animal's size turn from advantage into liability? Constraining movement. Marshy ground, riverbanks, narrow passes, the edge of snow or ice, and crowded waterholes all do the same thing. They limit turning. They blunt acceleration. They reduce escape routes. The trap isn't always a cliff story. Often it's just choosing the wrong ground for the animal and arranging people around it. When the animal tries to pivot in soft ground, it can't get traction. Its weight, the thing that makes it dangerous, now pins it in place. This is also risk management. Hunters shape where the encounter happens, not just how it happens, so fewer people have to get close at the worst moment. We still do this today when managing large animals. We use funnels, corridors, chutes, fences, and natural bottlenecks so the animal can't swing, surge, or bolt. But what if the animal is already dead, or predators brought it down first? How do we tell hunting from scavenging, or from finishing an animal that was already trapped? A hand lifts a stone knife, then pauses. The air smells wrong. Out on open ground, a mammoth lies on its side, huge and still, but not alone. Wolves or hyenas keep their distance, watching. The people don't run in cheering. They circle wide, test the wind, scan for the real danger, and move like they expect a fight, even if they never threw a spear. So, were ancient humans mainly hunters of giants, or just opportunistic users of giant carcasses? The most honest answer is both, depending on place and moment. Sometimes they killed directly. Sometimes they wounded and tracked until the animal slowed. Sometimes they finished an animal already trapped in mud, ice, or a bad spot. And sometimes they found a giant already dead from winter stress, accident, or predators. Here's why the argument won't die. Archaeology often preserves the cutting and hauling better than the instant the animal died. You can see sliced tendons, stripped ribs, and bones broken for marrow, but the kill itself can leave almost nothing, unless you get rare clues like embedded weapon fragments. There's also the opportunistic scavenging mechanism. A fresh giant carcass is a jackpot, and you don't need a heroic identity to take it. You need speed, coordination, and enough people to keep competitors back. That's the twist. Even scavenging can be high risk. Predators can return. Other groups can show up. The urgency and quick butchery marks can look like hunting because the clock is real either way. Many sites are mixed too. Human cuts, carnivore tooth marks, and time averaging where bones accumulate from multiple events. Places like Yana hint at flexible use, while Clovis mammoth associations stay debated in how often they represent kills versus intense processing. It's a familiar logic today. People take the cheap win when it appears, and take bigger risks only when the payoff is worth it. Whether hunted or found, what happened next? How do you turn a bus-sized body into food, tools, and survival without wasting it? A hand lifts a stone knife, then pauses. The air smells wrong. Out on open ground, a mammoth lies on its side, huge and still, but not alone. Wolves or hyenas keep their distance, watching. The people don't run in cheering. They circle wide, test the wind, scan for the real danger, and move like they expect a fight, even if they never threw a spear. So, were ancient humans mainly hunters of giants, or just opportunistic users of giant carcasses? The most honest answer is both, depending on place and moment. Sometimes they killed directly. Sometimes they wounded and tracked until the animal slowed. Sometimes they finished an animal already trapped in mud, ice, or a bad spot. And sometimes they found a giant already dead from winter stress, accident, or predators. Here's why the argument won't die. Archaeology often preserves the cutting and hauling better than the instant the animal died. You can see sliced tendons, stripped ribs, and bones broken for marrow, but the kill itself can leave almost nothing, unless you get rare clues like embedded weapon fragments. There's also the opportunistic scavenging mechanism. A fresh giant carcass is a jackpot, and you don't need a heroic identity to take it. You need speed, coordination, and enough people to keep competitors back. That's the twist. Even scavenging can be high risk. Predators can return. Other groups can show up. The urgency and quick butchery marks can look like hunting because the clock is real either way. Many sites are mixed too. Human cuts, carnivore tooth marks, and time averaging where bones accumulate from multiple events. Places like Yana hint at flexible use, while Clovis Mammoth associations stay debated in how often they represent kills versus intense processing. It's a familiar logic today. People take the cheap win when it appears, and take bigger risks only when the payoff is worth it. Whether hunted or found, what happened next? How do you turn a bust-sized body into food, tools, and survival without wasting it? Flakes of frost cling to a strip of red meat as it gets hung in the wind. The danger is over, but the work is just starting. A giant animal on the ground is not one meal. It's a whole system that has to be taken apart fast, before predators show up and before the weather ruins it. First, the hide gets opened and peeled back in heavy sheets. Then people follow seams with stone blades, lifting muscle away from bone. You can see this step in the archaeology. Repeated cut marks where tendons anchor, and long slicing lines where meat was removed cleanly. Soon the camp turns into production. Meat becomes strips for drying. Fat is saved because it's high-calorie insurance, and because it helps you live through cold. Big limb bones are cracked so the marrow can be scooped out, one of the richest foods on the whole animal. Sinew comes next. Those tough cords get pulled, cleaned, and laid out to dry. Later, they become binding for tools, repairs for gear, and the strong thread that keeps a weapon system together. Tusks and big bones aren't extras. They're raw material. Bone can become wedges, scrapers, and handles. Ivory can become points and small tools, and it lasts. So why risk giant animals at all? What made one carcass worth the danger? Because the payoff isn't dinner. It's meat, fat, marrow, hide for shelter and clothing, sinew for cordage, bone and tusk for tools, and in a few places, even building material. At Mezirich, mammoth bones were used in architecture, but that doesn't mean every bone wall came from a fresh kill. And burned bone? That shows up in some hearth contexts, especially where wood is scarce, but it's not automatic everywhere. This is why waste is a luxury. The harder food is to get, the more cultures go nose to tail. With humans able to take and reuse giants like this, what happened next? Did that strategy help reshape entire ecosystems? A school group shuffles past a towering mammoth skeleton, and almost nobody looks at anything else. That's normal. Big bones grab your attention, and they also grab archaeology. Giant animals leave giant remains, and those remains survive, get collected, and get displayed. Meanwhile, the meals that mattered every day, fish bones, bird bones, seeds, tubers, can be tiny, fragile, and easy to miss. So, did hunting giants change the world, and what should we learn from it now? In some places, people hunting and using megafauna probably did add real pressure, especially when hunters were organized, and the climate was already pushing animals into smaller, stressed habitats. But the best overall answer is messier. Many extinctions were multi-causal. Climate swings, shifting plants, changing water, and human impacts mixed together differently from one region to the next. Now, step back from that mammoth and imagine the larger, mostly invisible skeleton around it. People cooperating, tools built as systems, fire used carefully, routes remembered, rules taught, and landscapes used as part of the plan. The real predator isn't a single person with a spear. It's a scalable strategy, and that's the caution. Human systems scale fast. Today, our strongest force is still system-building technology plus coordination shaping environments. It's also how we protect wildlife. Corridors that reconnect habitats, policies that limit extraction, shared rules that actually get enforced, and decisions guided by layered evidence. If we want giants to survive now, the weapon we need is the same one we've always had: restraint, backed by knowledge. If you like this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to stay tuned for future videos.